Hello again and welcome. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Sylvie and you're listening to the Vacant Lot Podcast. This is a podcast where I relive and recap some of the best moments from one of my favorite cartoon series growing up, Hey Arnold. We are chugging right along into the podcast. This is episode 9. I'm feeling really good because on average, most podcasts don't make it past their 7th episode. So even if it's 1 or 2 episodes over the average, I'm feeling really good. We're still here. We're still happening. I'm finally seeing a little bit of feedback from some of the viewers. Just a few days ago, I had actually gotten my first bit of unsolicited feedback. I mention unsolicited because there's some people that ask about the podcast and I would show them the podcast and they would respond back, "Oh, pretty good podcast." But this was a response, I'm guessing, from someone who, if they haven't subscribed, they're at the very least have listened to some of the episodes. So I was just going through my Twitter the other day and I saw I had gotten a message from one of the followers. Her name is Katie Ziegler. Her Twitter name is @FrozenGenetic91. And she left this message in my inbox. "Hey, I just recently discovered your podcast through the Save the Jungle Movie group. And as a massive Hey Arnold geek also, I really like your podcast. I look forward to seeing more." Thank you, Katie, so much for that feedback. It lets me know that there are people that are actually listening. Sometimes I do get a bit paranoid if the stats I see through the media hosting I use, Libsyn, even though I see the numbers steadily increasing every day, it's always in the back of my head a worry that a lot of it's are bots or people that maybe listen to about 30 seconds and don't bother with the rest, but they still count that as a download. So the fact that I do have regular listeners and I do have people that are appreciating the show, that means the world to me. And I thank you so much for the feedback. Again, if there's any other feedback or questions that you'd like answered or just want to chat, once again, the Twitter page is @VacantLotShow on Twitter. You could also send me a line on the web page, VacantLotPodcast.com. I believe the contact page is still up. And you could send me an email as well at thevacantLotPodcast@gmail.com. So there are different ways you can get in touch with me. But in the meantime, thank you for listening. So if I keep with my current schedule, that is releasing a podcast episode twice a month, this episode I'm doing today should fall just before Christmas, which is very timely because, as it happens, this particular episode of the Vacant Lot Podcast is about the specials that have been aired on Hey Arnold. By special, I mean any episode that is the full length of the show. So it'd be a 22-minute special as opposed to only an 11-minute long episode. Hey Arnold ran for 5 seasons, and within those seasons, it had 13 specials. 12 of those specials were 22 minutes long. The other one was a 2-part special, so it was about an hour long. So I'm not doing a list of the best specials. I'm actually going to cover every single special that was aired during the run of Hey Arnold. Unlike the other lists that I've done, however, where there is no real order in how I present, I'm going to present this list by ascending impact, or I'm doing this list based on how I'm ranking this list based on how the episodes had an impact on me. The earlier the episode falls on this list, the less of an impact it had on me. Bear in mind, I would consider none of these episodes bad or inferior. It's just some of the episodes had a greater impact on me when I initially saw them than some of the other episodes. So if you hear the episode mentioned early, it probably didn't resonate with me as well as the ones that I might mention towards the end. So without further ado, let's get started. The first special I'd like to talk about is the season 4 special, Dino Checks Out, or as I'd like to call it, the special that no one really asked for. This special is actually surrounding the character Dino Spumoni. Dino Spumoni is an old Rat Pack-esque kind of lounge singer that first debuted in season 1, I believe, with the episode where he had a falling out with his partner Don Reynolds. He's mentioned in and out throughout the series. The first episode he's formally listed is the old building from season 1. He has a bit part really in that, but then as the series goes on, he kind of flits in and out throughout the series. And then we see him again in season 4, which, as I've mentioned in the previous episode that I did of the best season 4, season 5 episodes, there weren't really a lot of episodes that resonated with me from those 2 seasons, but for whatever reason this season had a glut of 22-minute specials, and this was one of them, where they decided to focus on Dino Spumoni. Basic premise of Dino Checks Out: Arnold comes home one day to find out through the news that Dino Spumoni had apparently fell overboard and had died. So there's a funeral and everyone's mourning and everyone's really sad. That is until one day Arnold runs into Dino Spumoni and he decides to hide out at the boarding house. So basically Dino Spumoni fakes his own death in effort to just live off the royalties he would receive from the alleged posthumous success of his albums. Or so he thought. After a while, he gets bored of apparently not existing to other people, and also a bit enraged when he finds out that someone takes on his persona and begins to profit off the legacy that he had built. So basically the whole episode is Arnold trying to convince Dino Spumoni that though he thought his life was crummy, his life really wasn't that bad. Dino only realizes that when he sees someone else trying to live the life that he'd left behind. As I said, this is a interesting episode. It's not one that I think I don't know many people who consider Dino Spumoni their number one character. He's an interesting one-shot character, or a character that, you know, it's nice to see him from time to time. But I find it kind of odd that they would devote an entire episode to Dino Spumoni of all characters. I think I mentioned after about season 3 they start tackling other characters that don't get a lot of screen time, but it seems like by season 4 and season 5, they're scraping the bottom of the barrel. I mean, for God's sake, there's an episode about Monkey Man, of all people. So this kind of plays into them showing the spotlight on more or less a background character, I suppose. Some interesting points about Dino Checks Out. Well, first of all, it kind of skirts that realm of reality and fiction. And by that I say, sometimes in an animated series, in a self-contained animated series, they want to lay reference to characters or icons that exist in the real world, but maybe through lawsuits, maybe for legal reasons, or just because they want to emphasize that this is a separate universe from our world. They'll make up names, or they'll make up things that are vaguely relevant to our world. For example, in the world of Hey Arnold, there's a drink called Yahoo, which is a chocolate soda, not unlike the chocolate soda that exists in our world, Yoo-hoo. Again, maybe for legal reasons, they couldn't really use the same name, but it's obviously the same product. Another example, I guess, would be the Abdicator, who has this really thick European accent and actually sort of looks like Arnold Schwarzenegger. For whatever reason, it's not the character Arnold Schwarzenegger, but it's heavily implied that it's the same guy. Same with, let's say, Ronnie Matthews, which would be a spoof on the actual Latin singer Ricky Martin. So again, there's lots of characters that show up that exist in the cartoon world, but have real-life equivalents, but they're not exactly the same. This is interesting because at the start of this episode, when they detail Dino Spumoni's life, they talk about him doing collaborations in the 80s with actual artists like Tiffany and Run DMC. And I noticed they were kind of doing that a bit more after season 3. They kind of let the veil down and made the show feel more like in the actual world. Because I think they had there's an episode in season 4 or season 5 where at the very end, for whatever reason, they have a cameo from one of the monkeys, which is kind of random. And also another episode, don't quite remember call the name of it, but an episode that centers around Mr. Wynn, where they're having a discussion at the dinner table and they bring up Arnold Schwarzenegger, who, again, as I said, we weren't sure if he existed in this universe or not, but I guess he does now. So the veil kind of drops after season 3, and they kind of make better allusions to elements of our actual world. So I just thought that was interesting. Also kind of interesting is the casual mention of death in this episode. I definitely think the word death or died happens over 10 times in this episode. And I find that unusual because Nickelodeon, at the start of the series, they were very, very careful not to use that word unless necessary, unless there was no other way to say it. But usually they'd find some sort of euphemism to get around using any mention of the word death or dying or dead. And you see this in particular in the season 2 episode Monkey Business, because when Helga suspects that she has the disease monkey nucleosis, she's going through the symptoms and she sees that the final symptom is basically the patient dying. But they don't use the term death, they use the term expiration, which means the same thing, but they're very particular in using the word expire. Even towards the end, where Helga finds out she doesn't have monkey nucleosis, in her glee and happiness, she jumps out of bed and she's like, I'm not gonna expire. Usually if you find out you're not gonna die, you'll probably say, I'm not gonna die, but she specifically uses the term expire. And I find that interesting. I find it an interesting contrast between the earlier seasons of Hey Arnold and this season 4 episode, where they just throw out that word like candy. So, other interesting thing, the episode sticks pretty closely with canon. Again, back to the season 1 or 2 episode Partners, where Dino Spumoni breaks up with his partner Don Reynolds. It's revealed that the two need each other in the case that Don Reynolds was the expert of the lyrics, but couldn't write music to save his life, whereas Dino Spumoni was the genius behind the piano, but he couldn't write lyrics to save his life. And they kind of play on that in a scene where Dino shows off a new song that he wrote. And while it sounds good, half the lyrics are ba-ba-da-be-da, just basically him scatting. So I like that little bit of consistency from the earlier seasons. I guess the biggest thing to point out about this episode is how adult it feels, right? It deals with a pretty heady topic, an older person dying, or even in the sense, a person faking their own death to just get away from it all. Dino Checks Out is very reminiscent to the season 7 episode of The Simpsons, Bart the Fink. This is the episode where Krusty fakes his own death and Bart feels guilty about it until he realizes that Krusty's actually not dead at all. It's a very similar storyline, which actually surprises me that Hey Arnold would kind of take a page from a more adult show for their plot. I don't know. Maybe they were towing the line to see if they could maybe do more with Dino. Maybe there was talk of maybe a spin-off. I don't know. I'm just doing speculation right now, but yeah, it's of all the episodes of Hey Arnold, this is probably one of the more mature episodes that the series had done. Even some of the dialogue. There's a scene where the reporters interview one of Dino Spumoni's exes, and she kind of flubs, or maybe not, maybe it's intentional. She kind of does a play on a tagline for the Dino Spumoni ripoff, where he's not the real Dino Spumoni, but an incredible simulation, where when they talk to her and she's actually dating the new Dino Spumoni, she says, he's an incredible stimulation. And I don't know if that was intentional or not, but it's definitely a little tongue-in-cheek. And it's like, oh, what's that mean? But yeah, so I feel like I've talked way too much about one of the least important specials of Hey Arnold, but hey, if you're a big Dino Spumoni fan, this is right up your alley. So the next episode I want to talk about is the season 4 special, Veterans Day. So this is the first actual holiday special that I will talk about. So they obviously show this episode every Veterans Day, or because I live in Canada, they used to show this episode around every Remembrance Day. So usually in November they would show this episode. Basic premise of Veterans Day: Gerald's dad, Martin Johansson, and Arnold's grandpa decide to take the two boys on a trip to the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., to get a true taste of what it means, I guess, to celebrate and appreciate Veterans Day. So the episode mostly takes place in a road trip where Grandpa talks in length about his time during World War II and how he single-handedly beat the Germans in the Battle of the Bulge. Whereas Gerald's dad tells the story of how he was at Vietnam, but Gerald's disappointed because he doesn't have the big rough and tumble, guns a-blazing war stories that he was hoping for. Gerald's dad mainly stayed as a clerk in the Vietnam War, but it's revealed at the end that by Gerald's dad being there during the Vietnam War, he was actually responsible for saving the life of one of his fellow soldiers. So this is a nice Arnold Gerald holiday episode. Most of the holiday episodes don't really touch on Arnold and Gerald as much as they would Arnold and Helga. And it's nice to see more of Gerald's family too. Gerald's dad's always a good character. Of all the holiday episodes, unfortunately, this is probably not like my least favorite. Again, not a bad episode. It's just compared to the other holiday episodes, which are so amazing and so good, this one kind of falls by the wayside. Still a good episode, and honestly has the best Hitler battle ever in the history of animated cartoons. Its absurdity almost runs to like those old 1940s propaganda cartoons that the Looney Tunes used to show. So it's it has that one scene. Otherwise, worth a look every November. The next special I'd like to talk about is season 4's Summer Love. Now, there's a trope that's common more in anime than in Western animation called the beach episode. In this episode, it's basically all the characters of the show, for whatever reason, going to the beach. It's usually an excuse to get the female characters in bikinis or skimpier outfits, but basically a beach episode is more or less filler. You could take the episode out of a season and it wouldn't really impact the overall story arc or storyline that's being conveyed in the season. So, Summer Love, while it's a good episode of season 4, probably one of the better ones, it's a beach episode. There's really nothing that goes on of significance. Basic premise of the episode: Arnold and Helga both end up going to the same beach town during their summer vacation. Helga tries to get close to Arnold, but he ends up infatuated with this beautiful young girl by the name of Summer. When Helga discovers that Summer's intentions are impure, she tries to convince Arnold not to be played for a fool, all while Helga's family is more or less enjoying the beach town. Well, Miriam is, and Big Bob isn't. And the rest of Arnold's family, Arnold's grandma and grandpa, including the boarders, are enjoying their time as well. So it's an episode. It's cool to see the characters outside of their element of the city. You don't see that very often. But rewatching the episode again, I was thinking, yeah, there's not really a whole lot that goes on here. There's no real plot development. Helga helps Arnold. Arnold's appreciative. They hang out a bit in the last 2 minutes of the episode. Yes, there's a kiss, but it's the same type of kiss that you saw in school play. It played up more for laughs here. So, again, it's an okay episode, but it's not a necessary episode. The only interesting thing, 2 things of note in this episode: they bring back Philip K. Dick, who was the second voice of Arnold, to voice Summer's bumbling beach bum boyfriend. It's nice to see that they're still giving Philip work even after his voice had matured after season 3. He also does the voice of the character Ludwig in another episode within this season. where he gives Wolfgang a run for his money. So it's nice to hear back from one of the original Arnolds. Another thing, probably the best thing of this episode is actually Jamil W. Smith's role. He's the voice of Gerald. And as I may have mentioned in an earlier episode, Gerald's voice matured somewhere between season 3 and season 4. It became deeper, and they had to do some digital altering to make it still sound like the Gerald for the show. So I think they took advantage of Jamil's maturing voice, and they had him play a Rastafarian towards the end of the episode. There's a scene where Grandpa thinks he's stuck on this little mound of land, and then this Rastafarian comes up and notices Arnold's grandpa freaking out, and he probably delivers two of the best lines in the entire episode. I used to replay this over and over because it made me laugh so hard. And he would say, "Hey man, I think he talking to the duck." I'm not doing it justice, but the characters only has like 2 lines, and it only lasts for about a minute, but the delivery is just perfect, and it makes the episode worthwhile, I guess. But yeah, it's definitely worth checking out. So next special I want to talk about is the season 2 episode, Arnold's Halloween. Basic premise of Arnold's Halloween: it's Halloween, and Arnold and Gerald wanted to play a spooky prank on the boarders at Sunset Arms. So they decide to do a spoof of the War of the Worlds and make it seem like aliens have come down to take over the city. Meanwhile, Helga and her gang decide to collectively dress up as aliens and go trick-or-treating. So unbeknownst to them, they kind of play directly into Arnold and Gerald's prank, and it gets exacerbated to the point where the city's in total bedlam because they think there's an actual invasion going on. Meanwhile, this also spurs Helga's dad, Big Bob Pataki, to try to rally and destroy the head of the aliens, not realizing that the head is his own daughter, Helga. So yes, this is a humorous take on Orson Welles' War of the Worlds. This episode is basically a showcase of the actor Maurice LaMarche's voice talents. If you don't know, Maurice LaMarche is the voice of Helga's dad, Big Bob Pataki. He is also the voice of the character within this episode, Douglas Kane, who in itself is a spoof of Orson Welles, and even does the Orson Welles voice. I know this because he does the exact same voice for an animated version of Orson Welles in the old 90s animated series, The Critic. And another thing is, like, the voice actually sounds identical to Brain from the 90s cartoon Pinky and the Brain, because it's essentially the same voice. But I didn't know back in the day that Big Bob Pataki and Douglas Kane / Orson Welles were all the same voice. So it shows the scope of his vocal talents. I had the opportunity to go to a panel to see Maurice LaMarche in the summer, and I decided against it. I think there was another one going on at the same time, and I went to that one instead, and I kind of regret that because I would have loved to see Maurice LaMarche doing what he does best. Next episode I'm going to talk about briefly is the season 4 episode, Helga on the Couch. I say I'm talking about this one briefly because I've already talked in length about Helga on the Couch in the episode where I talk about the best Helga episodes. But basically, to recap, Helga on the Couch is the episode where she goes to see a psychologist about her rage problems and determine why she's always harming Brainy and just being all around bossy and mean towards people. So the episode culminates with her revealing her feelings for Arnold to the psychologist, Mrs. Bliss, as well as also revealing why she has such strong feelings towards Arnold. So again, I've already kind of talked in length about Helga on the Couch in the best Helga episodes. If you want to hear more about that, I suggest you listen to that. Next episode I want to talk about is yet again another episode I've already talked about, is season 5's Married. I spoke in length about Married in the episode where I talk about the best episodes of season 4 and season 5. So this is the episode where Helga and Arnold both have dreams about being married to each other after receiving the fortune via Rhonda's fortune telling device that they're to be wed. So they both have dreams about being married to one another. I might have mentioned this already in that previous episode, but I call this the quintessential fan service episode, because while it's so enjoyable to watch Arnold and Helga in the scope of a dream doing all sorts of zany things like fighting terrorists and becoming president and having kids, it doesn't actually happen. It's just a dream, so it's another one of those episodes where there's no real plot development. It's just filler, but it's good filler because we get a glimpse at what all the characters would look like if they were older. And I think a lot of people are hoping that we get another taste of this when we see the Jungle movie in 2017, especially since the original voice of Arnold, Torrin Caudell, aka Lane Torrin, is coming back. It hasn't been confirmed that he's voicing Arnold, but a lot of people suspect there might be a scene where we get to see an adult Arnold. So Married is a taste of it, but I hope we get another sampling during the Jungle movie. Next episode I want to talk about, yet another episode that I've already talked about, is season 3's The School Play. So this was a full special. I believe this was one of the first specials that wasn't holiday related, but was still a big deal because, oh my gosh, everyone wants to see Helga and Arnold kiss. So yeah, I spoke in length about this one already in the episode of best season 3 episodes, but basically Mr. Simmons' 4th grade class is doing the play Romeo and Juliet. Arnold's been cast to play Romeo, and Helga schemes and plans her way into becoming Juliet, so she has the opportunity to kiss Arnold at the end of the play. Like I said, it's the first non-holiday special. I remember they promoted this one heavily when it came out. I was so stoked for this episode when it first came out. And it still holds up. It's still a good episode. We didn't quite get that kiss that we wanted, but the first Hey Arnold movie made up for it, and we actually got to see the kiss. But it was a nice stepping stone. Again, no real plot development from this episode. It's just an opportunity of seeing Helga do what she does best, plot and scheme, and show what lengths she'd go to express her love towards Arnold. Next episode I want to talk about is season 3 special Arnold's Thanksgiving. This is one of the last episodes I believe Philip K. Dick did as Arnold. I think the last one was School Play, oddly enough. But you can tell because towards the end of season 3, his voice got really deep. In fact, I think there's one episode, the episode Career Day, I know this is off topic, but in the episode Career Day, his voice is at 1 octave, and then spontaneously in the episode, his voice just drops like a full, like, it gets like a lot deeper. So you could tell they were kind of struggling, I guess, with his voice maturing around that time. So it was sad to have him finally retire from being Arnold, but you could tell towards the end of the season that his voice was getting, I guess, too deep to really do the role justice. Anyway, in Arnold's Thanksgiving, both Arnold and Helga are fed up with how their families celebrate Thanksgiving and how they feel that there's got to be more to the holiday, or that other families do it much better than theirs do. So they both escape from their homes and meet up and decide to seek out the perfect Thanksgiving. They figure Mr. Simmons has the perfect Thanksgiving based on the play that he developed. But when they go to his house, they realize that basically every family has some zany tradition or zany way of celebrating that's not perfect at all. They finally see that face to face when they go to Mr. Simmons' house. So I like this episode. It's nice to see Arnold and Helga coexisting without driving each other insane. They both come together with the common purpose of seeking out the perfect Thanksgiving. So in that regard, they decide to be civil towards one another, which is rare because usually Helga's trying to push Arnold away. But they team up with the common goal. And while it's not romantic or fluffy in any way, it's nice to see them acting like friends for a change. I think the biggest highlight of this episode is Mr. Simmons. We get a closer glimpse of Mr. Simmons' family life in the Thanksgiving episode. We get to see his mother, Pearl, who's this rotund, kind of sassy, overall not pleasant woman to be around. Then we see his, I guess, maybe Canadian Uncle Chuck. I think he's a spoof on Cartman and Uncle Buck, I guess, because he looks like John Candy dressed as Cartman from South Park. He doesn't say much throughout the episode. He's basically eating throughout the whole scene. Then we see his kind of dreary, morose friend, Joy, who'd gotten fired from her latest job. And then we see the most interesting character of the group, Peter. Now, Peter, it's implied that Peter is just a friend to Mr. Simmons, but there's a throwaway line in the scene where Pearl says, "I didn't know you guys were going to the opera," and Peter makes a snide comment, "There's a lot of things you don't know, Pearl." There was a lot of speculation after that episode, and it was finally confirmed in a chat by Craig Bartlett that yes, Mr. Simmons' character is in fact gay. So I guess it would be one of the first openly gay characters in Hey Arnold. And I don't see any problem with that. My only comment on that is I find it kind of lazy that it has to be confirmed outside of the show. It's kind of like with the J.K. Rowling and Dumbledore. I think there was an interview at one point where a person had asked, based on all the clues from the book, was Professor Dumbledore from Harry Potter gay? In which case J.K. Rowling says, yes, he was gay. And again, that's all well and good, but why not show it in the actual source material? And I know, like, I know what I'm asking for, because this is Nickelodeon. It's a kid's channel. And you have to keep in mind that this was the 90s. But the fact that they're bringing the Jungle movie back in 2017, it does invite the question, will they express this more in the show? We have progressive shows now like Steven Universe, where a lot of the main characters are of the same sex and they rather openly express their admiration and affection towards one another. And it's so cool now that it's commonplace and it's accepted. It's not stigmatized like it was in the 90s when the show originally came out. So it will be interesting to see if they talk about it. If they don't, like I said, it's not a huge deal, but rather than just confirm it after the fact in a chat, it'd be nice to see if Craig Bartlett actually shows that maybe Peter and Mr. Simmons are actually together. Would be a nice touch. I'm only going to make one additional comment, and I am aware that this episode became known for the quote-unquote infamous scene after Arnold and Helga leaves the house. When Arnold and Helga are at Mr. Simmons' house, the family gets into a huge uproar and they start fighting. And it doesn't let up even after Arnold and Helga leave. As they're leaving, you can see from the window that two of the characters seem to be engaged in some sort of adult act. That's what's alleged in the people that scrutinize the scene. All I have to say about that is, come on, guys, it's a kid's show. Like, really? People look way too much into it. Even recently, there was an article posted that speculated that the reason the stoop kid could never leave his stoop is actually he's there for drug dealing purposes. Like, it boggles the mind how people can take something fairly innocent and just flip it on its head. I accept the fact that maybe the stoop kid was abandoned as a baby. Maybe he is an orphan, but some people just want to take it too far. So that's all I'm going to mention about that thing is just like anyone who regarding that scene from Arnold Thanksgiving, all I got to say is you're thinking way too much into it. Okay, so next episode I'd like to talk about is April Fool's Day. April Fool's Day, while it is considered a season 5 episode, I like to consider it the unofficial season 6. And there's a reason why I consider April Fool's Day a season 6 episode. April Fool's Day, along with The Journal, are two episodes in particular that just feel different from the last season of Hey Arnold. Maybe that has to do with the fact that Arnold is no longer voiced by Spencer Klein at this point. Arnold is voiced by the new actor, Alex Linz, which I personally think Alex Linz does not get nearly enough credit for doing the voice. I know he only did it for 2 episodes, but there was a quality to his version of Arnold that, while it's not comparable to Lane Torren or Philip Dyke or Spencer Klein's, it was appropriate. And I'm really heartbroken that Alex Linz wasn't able to do the voice of Arnold for the Jungle Movie, because apparently he was pegged to play Arnold in the Jungle Movie had the Jungle Movie come out in the early 2000s. Another reason this episode feels different from the others, it's one of the few episodes that had art direction by, and I'm going to probably butcher his name, but Raimi Musquez. And Raimi, this is significant because Raimi was not only the art director of this episode, but also the art director of The Journal, as well as he was responsible for the concept art that circulated on the internet for the Jungle Movie. I have a bit of a conspiracy theory that maybe this artwork wasn't made specifically for the original Jungle Movie. Perhaps it was trickled out to garner interest in making the Jungle Movie. Like, this was a long game to eventually get the CEOs at Nick to finally greenlight the show, and that this artwork was more recent than they had let on. Same thing with the concept clip of Arnold's parents in San Lorenzo. I think this was all media that was intentionally trickled in to garner interest, and it wasn't just hidden away. That's my theory. But anyway, I'm getting off topic. So, April Fool's Day is actually one of the last Hey Arnold episodes that I had seen. I don't think I saw April Fool's Day until maybe a solid year or 2 after the series had ended, which actually surprised me. I think I actually had to watch it online, because I don't even think Hey Arnold was being aired on TV anymore at the time. But, so anyway, in April Fool's Day, Arnold is the unfortunate victim of a lot of rather nasty April Fool's Day pranks. I guess he's considered an easy mark, because throughout the day, he's pranked by his grandpa, and then when he goes to school, he's pranked incessantly by Helga, to the point where, though he's usually the pacifist and the type to turn the other cheek, he decides that he's going to use the granddaddy of all pranks. So his grandpa lends him the prank that he used against Jimmy Kafka when he was a kid, and in the resulting prank, Helga ends up blinded. The blinding is only temporarily. However, Arnold doesn't realize that. So Helga uses that to her advantage to prank Arnold for the rest of the day leading up to the April Fool's Day dance at night. Arnold eventually finds out that Helga is pranking him. So Arnold retaliates in the best way he knows how against Helga. This episode fascinates me because, unlike a lot of the other specials where it doesn't look like there's any significant plot development, April Fool's Day plays differently from a lot of the other specials. And I think part of the reason is because it feels like an episode that might have actually happened after the original movie. That's my theory. So I don't want to get too much into it, but in the movie, Helga confesses her love to Arnold and then quickly takes it back at the end. So the way Arnold regards Helga in this episode, in both ways where Arnold pranks Helga, he does it in a way that seemingly takes advantage of the knowledge that Helga likes him, which is interesting because he doesn't really use this to an advantage in any other episode in the series. And even towards the end, when he tries to prank Helga for the second time, Gerald whispers something in his ear. We never actually hear what Gerald's plan is against Helga. So maybe Arnold is oblivious and it's Gerald that knows. But when Arnold pranks Helga the second time, it's in a way that implies that he knows Helga's secret. And for the first time, he's actually using that to his advantage. So I like this episode because, unlike a lot of the others, it does actually show like there's some growth or some plot, there's some character development within the characters. And that's what makes it more special than an episode like, say, Summer Love, where they coexist, but nothing is really learned or nothing is really gained from having seen it. Next episode I'd like to talk about is season 1 episode, Arnold's Valentine, aka Arnold Gets Catfished. In this episode, Helga is desperate to reveal her deep dark secret to Arnold. She decides to impersonate Arnold's pen pal from France, Cecile, in an effort to get closer to Arnold. Meanwhile, Arnold is trying to get close to his crush, Ruth P. McDougal. He sets up a anonymous date at a French restaurant, Chez Pierre, which happens to be across the street from the restaurant where he's supposed to meet the fake Cecile at Chez Paris. So basically, Arnold is trying to meet 2 girls on Valentine's Day at neighboring restaurants, Chez Pierre and Chez Paris, and hijinks ensue. But Gerald's along to help with the situation. I really liked this episode when I was a kid. It was the first in my naivety at 8 years old. I thought, oh my gosh, this is the episode where Arnold's finally going to find out that Helga likes him and Helga's going to confess her feelings. And in hindsight now, it's a bit silly, and now that the show's been on for 5 seasons and this episode came out in season 1, it's fairly obvious that wasn't going to happen, but it was still nice to hope, especially when they were promoting this episode before it finally came out. So there was a lot of hope and potential with this episode, and for the most part it does deliver. Just a few notes. I find Helga's plan really questionable. So she wants to dress up as someone that Arnold's never met and confess her feelings. And I'm not sure how she expects Arnold to take that, especially since he doesn't really know Cecile aside from her letters. In fact, that's kind of the main point of this episode is once Arnold really knows what Ruth is like, he finally loses his crush for her. I know I spoke at length about the episode Helga on the Couch and Married, I guess, and the thought flitted through my head, well, would Arnold and Helga actually make it? Like, could they actually work as a couple? And at first I had my skepticism, but rewatching Arnold's Valentine made me realize that Arnold doesn't really know the real Helga. Like, he knows of her sad family life, and he knows that she doesn't mean a lot of the stuff that she says when she's bullying people around. But Arnold's yet to really see, like, Helga unmasked, like just Helga being true and sincere. And you kind of get a taste of that in Arnold's Valentine, even though Helga's acting like someone that she isn't. They vaguely imply that Arnold would be fond of Helga if Helga acted the way that she acted as Cecile. But they don't outright seal the deal. There's a scene in the episode where Helga, as Cecile, asks Arnold if he likes her too. And we never actually get a response to that. The episode just kind of glosses over the answer. But I'd like to see Arnold's Valentine as the stepping stone for what's to come in the Jungle movie. A lot of fans theorize that Arnold will finally realize that Helga was Cecile in the Jungle movie. There's supposed to be an alleged scene where Helga's hair falls in the same way it fell at the end of Arnold's Valentine, in which case he'll finally realize that it's Helga. Because a lot of people, I guess, are frustrated with the fact that Arnold and Helga are practically nose to nose at the end of Arnold's Valentine. He looks her in the face and he's like, "Who are you?" And just because her hair is like parted down and he totally doesn't recognize her, or maybe he doesn't want to acknowledge the fact that Helga could be anything but a bossy, domineering bully. Who's to say? But the ending of this episode always gets me because he looks up plaintively in the night sky when he reaches the boarding house and he's holding the red shoe. So I think we all wanted him to someday return that shoe, or at least find out who the shoe belonged to, or at least have an episode about it, but we never did. So I hope that sort of unresolved plot from Arnold's Valentine finally gets resolved in the movie. Okay, we're getting into the big guns now. Next episode I'm talking about is season 1's Arnold's Christmas. This is the one that that they usually air around Christmas. It's on a lot of people's list of best Arnold episodes, and it's not hard to see why. Basic premise of Arnold's Christmas: Arnold is determined to find the perfect gift for his Secret Santa match, Mr. Wynn. When he discovers that the only thing Mr. Wynn wants for Christmas is to be reunited with his daughter, whom he got separated from in Vietnam, Arnold and Gerald go to seek the help of Mr. Bailey, the only one who's still working on Christmas Eve at the Federal Office of Information. So they do all of Mr. Bailey's Christmas shopping in order to convince him to seek out Mr. Wynn's daughter. Meanwhile, Helga is trying to find the perfect gift for Arnold. She wants something big and flashy, and she thinks that'll impress him. But when she finds out what Arnold truly wants for Christmas, and when she's afforded the opportunity to give him that wish, she's tasked with the quote-unquote moral dilemma to decide, does she want to keep the gift for herself, or does she want to help out Arnold, who will ultimately help out Mr. Wynn? So it's a very touching episode. A lot of people like to point out that there's not a lot of talk about the Vietnam War in cartoons, much less the Vietnam War from the side of a Vietnamese person. So it's a very poignant episode. I think I appreciate the episode now more as an adult than I did as a child. One, for the fact that it tackled a topic that is very serious and not all about getting a gift or getting the best toy or fighting people for the next new thing. And also, as an adult, you realize the sheer terror, the sheer annoyance of having to shop during the Christmas season. All the stores are packed, there's long lines, your arms get heavy from carrying bags. So to see Arnold and Gerald hop from store to store to store on Christmas Eve, no less, you appreciate that more as someone who actually has to shop for people to get them Christmas presents. So you really have to applaud the effort they go to just to make Mr. Wynn happy. This is an episode I always enjoy watching. Honestly, the ending doesn't hit me the ending doesn't hit me as hard as a lot of people do. A lot of people say they cry watching the end of it, and it is touching, but I just like it for how this episode stands alone. Not only as like a standalone episode in Hey Arnold, but also as a standalone episode for Christmas. Like this is not only one of the best Hey Arnold episodes, probably one of the best animated Christmas specials to date. Up there perhaps with maybe the Simpsons Christmas special. I like the one A Wish for Wings, that would work. The Charlie Brown Christmas is up there with timeless classics that could be shown every year. Well past when Hey Arnold's no longer on the air, it's one of those Christmas specials that should be aired at least once in the holiday season. The next episode I want to talk about is the episode I kind of briefly mentioned a few episodes ago, Parents' Day. This is the season 3-4-5 episode, because this episode, I don't really know which season Parents' Day belongs to. So, basic premise of Parents' Day, it's the Parents' Day family tournament weekend, and Arnold feels a bit self-conscious about having his grandparents step in as his teammates. He eventually lets them know at the end of the first day that he doesn't feel comfortable with them competing in the tournament because he doesn't consider them his real parents. And then later on, Arnold asks Grandpa what really happened to his parents. In the past, his grandpa would always tell him fantastical stories of things that may or may not have happened in their life. But when Arnold presses, he finally gets the story of how his parents went off on a trip and never came back one day. Arnold contemplates this information and thinks about his life living in the boarding house and realizes that his Grandma and Grandpa truly are his parents, and together they decide to go and finish up the Parents' Day tournament. I couldn't remember a lot from this episode, so this was one of the episodes I really had to rewatch to get the basic plot. And rewatching it, I realized why I didn't remember much, because I think it was one of those episodes I actually didn't like watching because it was hard to watch. While a lot of people say that Arnold's Christmas is the episode that made them cry, this is the episode that got me very teary-eyed towards the end, because it's hard. It's a hard episode to watch. It kind of sets the stage for the episode that I'll talk about soon enough. But you see an Arnold that's very morose and withdrawn in this episode. And it's always hard to see that. It's especially hard when Helga's dad, Big Papa Tacky, flat out calls Arnold an orphan in the middle of the competition. That's just rough. And couple that with the masterful music by Jim Lang. This is one of the few episodes that has a different ending theme, but it's so whimsical, but at the same time bittersweet and sad. It's just, I was in tears by the end of watching it, and I realized, yeah, this is why I don't watch this one a lot. But it's such an important episode. The only reason I probably don't watch this one as much is because of the final episode I want to talk about, which is the season 5 two-parter episode, The Journal. I say season 5, though as I mentioned with April Fool's Day, I consider The Journal more or less a season 6 episode. It just feels like it happens after the Hey Arnold movie. And in fact, it probably does, because I believe the movie takes place in the summer, whereas The Journal takes place in October. So it's safe to assume that this took place after the events of the first Hey Arnold movie. So in The Journal, Arnold is finally fed up with hearing stories about his parents. So he puts the stuff away that reminds him of his parents and discovers his father's old journal. So the two episodes basically recap the days where he met Arnold's mother, Stella, and how they came to fall in love and how Arnold came to be. I believe I spoke of this episode at length in the best season 4 and season 5 episodes, but it just bears repeating that this is the pivotal Hey Arnold special. This is the one where when I was finished watching this, I was like, oh, we need the Jungle movie. It gets you stoked to finally see the Jungle movie in 2017. I only saw the special aired once, and that was ironically the day that I saw the Hey Arnold movie. I think opening day was when they aired The Journal, which I totally wasn't expecting, and it was so awesome to see, and thank goodness I recorded it because it was such an amazing episode. And how I wish that the movie was like this episode, because they were finally reaching their stride after the so-so season 4, season 5. If the movie had been an extrapolation of The Journal, I would have been happy. It could still be an extrapolation of The Journal. From what I'm to understand, I think Raimi Musquez is coming back for the Jungle movie. I have to look into that. But I will definitely be watching The Journals part 1 and 2 to definitely get stoked for the movie that's coming out in 2017. So that concludes this list of the Hey Arnold specials. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you would like to contact me, as I had mentioned earlier, you can tweet at me at Vacant Lot Show on Twitter. You can also like and comment on the Facebook page, the Vacant Lot Podcast. You can email me at thevacantLotPodcast@gmail.com. And if you like listening to this podcast, you can subscribe to it on iTunes, or you can also follow on Google Play, on Podbean, on Stitcher, and on TuneIn. So that's all I have to say for now. For all of you out there listening, I hope you have a happy holidays. Stay warm, stay safe, and talk to you soon. Bye-bye. The song you are listening to is Sweatari by the band Escalate. Be sure to download their album The Pop Machine on iTunes. That's the band Escalate, ESCALATE !